Good afternoon, Professor Smith. This is Phil Persing checking in with my video for the nonprofit sector labor force. Bear with me as I do have some notes that I'm going to be referencing as I did the video. So the first question you asked was, what is the nonprofit sector labor force? Well, essentially the nonprofit sector labor force is represented by several different industries. This includes things like public charities, educational organizations, healthcare organizations such as hospitals, religious organizations, and community-based organizations as well. Sometimes the workers are paid, but oftentimes they are volunteers. It's typically a mix. It's not always one or the other. It just really depends on the structure of that organization and their funding. As of 2013, the nonprofit sector employed nearly 14.4 million people in the United States, and this is roughly 10.6% of the national workforce. So the second question posed is, would volunteer firefighters and EMS workers be considered part of this labor force? And the short answer is yes. When you think about a fire department like I work in, that's a major metropolitan area that is fully career and staffed, and we actually do make money off of transports and inspections and other things like that. It's not really talking about us. It's more for specifically like a volunteer department. So again, the short answer is yes, but both types of workers, for an EMS worker or a volunteer firefighter, would really be considered part of this labor force. And I define the labor force as really having a mix of paid and volunteer, so this really does fit the bill of what we're talking about. And many, especially rural fire departments, rely heavily on volunteers, and some even operate as a nonprofit entity, and the same goes for many EMS organizations. The majority of fire departments in this country are volunteer, or at minimum volunteer, a volunteer / career department. So they have maybe a combination of paid and volunteer. So the next question is, can the nonprofit sector help FES organizations prepare communities for disasters, mitigate the disasters when they occur, and then return to normal after the disaster is over? And the answer to this is absolutely yes, they can. There's many ways for a nonprofit to help a community before, during, and after a catastrophe. So I broke it up into those three categories, and I'll start with preparing for the disaster. And while there are many community-based programs, whether through these whether it's a fire department or or the Salvation or an Army or something like that, I chose to talk a little bit about the American Red Cross. They're certainly one of the more famous and well-known nonprofit organizations, and they really do support the community in many, many ways. They like to use the term getting the community Red Cross ready, and they can assist citizens in a lot of different ways. They can help citizens make disaster plans. They can help them create a disaster kit for their home, and then they really just keep them informed on potential threats. One example of this is an initiative they do called Sound the Alarm. Essentially what they do is they go out into these lower socioeconomic areas, and they will canvass whole neighborhoods, and they will test existing smoke detectors, and they will install new smoke detectors. And as anybody who's been in the fire service knows, smoke detectors truly do make a difference and save lives. I know we actually do a similar program through my department, but this is just one thing that the American Red Cross does, one of many. So that's definitely just kind of one example of something that you would do before disaster strikes. And obviously a house fire isn't a major hurricane, but a disaster or a house fire is a disaster. It may just be for that one family. So during the disaster, you certainly have that as well. A lot of these nonprofit organizations will respond to disasters. And I chose to talk about the Salvation Army. The American Red Cross, which I talked about, they also do the same thing. But for this example, I thought I'd choose something different. So the Salvation Army, they have what they called Emergency Disaster Service Teams, or for short, EDS teams. And they provide critical support and relief during disasters. And these services really include a lot of things. It's not one thing. It can be distributing food and water. It can be offering emotional and psychological support, It can be offering spiritual support. And they also will go out and they will support a lot of the local shelters that are already in place in the community. And they help give them food and water and other things that they need. So just as an example, something that happened this last year, Hurricane Helene, which was in 2024, the relief from the Salvation Army spanned over 6 states, and they deployed 69 mobile feeding units. And just some quick statistics for you, they were able to hand out, just during this one disaster alone, they handed out 125,000 hot meals, 26,000 meal kits, 73,000 drinks, 44,000 snacks. There were 14,000 volunteer hours logged, and they were able to feed people at 68 of those shelters that I had mentioned. So again, many examples, but that is just one of during an emergency, how they can help. So how do these nonprofits help out after emergencies? Well, again, I decided to choose a specific example, and I chose Habitat for Humanity. It's one of the more popular ones. A lot of people are familiar with it, especially with the former president Jimmy Carter being involved heavily with that. And I know in my lifetime I've heard a lot about them. I know they're one of the organizations that people see more of. So they're kind of their thing that they go by is that they believe that true and lasting recovery post-disaster happens when a family can feel safe and secure. And this is kind of where they are coming from when they're building these homes. So it's a little bit of an older article, but I found it was really interesting, was that post-Hurricane Katrina, which, obviously a little bit ago, almost 20 years ago now, in 2005, 5 years post-storm, Habitat for Humanity had built 2,219 homes in that region, in the areas affected by that. But more than that, they worked with a couple other similar organizations to rehab an additional 2,500 homes. So you're talking, just shy of 5,000 family homes from really this one organization, and that to me is a truly incredible number, especially for a nonprofit organization to be able to pull something like that off. So in conclusion, I would say that the nonprofit labor force is a critical partner for fire and EMS organizations during disasters and emergencies. They can help the community before an event, during an event, and after an event. The combination of resources can help guide a community through any disaster that we face. So thank you very much for listening. Have a great day.